Okay, so taking a look at this, you might be tempted initially to believe what you're looking at is a grassy, grassy, swampy stream bank or whatever. But not only is this not a grass, all this you see here, this isn't even an angiosperm. All right, this isn't even a flowering plant. We'll get a closer look in here for you. What we're looking at right now is actually a type of fern, if you can believe that. This is an Equistetum right here. These things are absolutely wild. No clue what species. Equistetum is the family. Doesn't feel like grass, doesn't grow like grass. Can you see what that's doing there? That sort of whorled structure there? So like I said, these guys are actually a type of fern. They're not the, they're not leptosporangiate ferns like most of the ferns, you're seeing around our, I might as well work this in now. You have four main classes of ferns. You have leptosporangiate ferns, which are the most quote-unquote evolved. Those are what you typically, any fern you typically would imagine as a fern, most people will recognize. Those are leptosporangiate. Polypodopsida is the clade that you're finding those in. There's tens of thousands of extant species in that clade. Some wild looking ones too. Tree ferns are leptosporangiate ferns. Then you have sort of one level back, you have the meradioid ferns. I'll correct myself, I'm getting this wrong. The meradioid ferns, which are giant, massive bastards. We don't get any of those here in the Northeast. Those are pretty much, restricted to the tropics, if I'm not mistaken. Meradiopsida would be the name of that clade. Going back one more from that, you have a clade that we do get here in the Northeast. You have the Ophioglossidae, the Ophioglossum, I'm gonna butcher it, but the adder's tongues, adder's tongues and grape ferns. Those are, one of those guys in that clade. And then finally, the furthest back, the most distantly related from what we traditionally think of ferns, are these Equitosopsida, I can't pronounce it. I'll put the thing down there. There's multiple different names. Equitisoid ferns, whatever. So these guys, the Ophioglossum ferns, the adder's tongues, and then the meradioid ferns are all what you call eusporangiate ferns. So basically the difference is this clade that we're now stuck with, this, most successful, again, quote, most highly evolved, do three, three quotations for extra irony, are the most highly evolved are leptosporangiate, meaning that they're basically generating their spores out of one cell. These eusporangiate ferns use multiple cells to, create their sporangia, their spore-bearing organs, and there's 1.5 million differences other than that, but that's the main, difference between the quote lower ferns and the quote higher ferns. Had no clue what other time I would get to talk about that. These guys, is another thing you should, learn about ferns, is you have ones that are dimorphic and monomorphic. So these are dimorphic. They put up a fertile shoot, and then they have these vegetative shoots, whereas ferns that are just, like a polypodium, which are leptosporangiate ferns, they're, they're going to do their spores just on the back of their vegetative leaves, in the sori and whatnot. I'll put a picture to show you. But monomorphic, dimorphic, leptosporangiate, eusporangiate. I'm dipping my toe into the fern world. I don't really need to go much further beyond that. Just know that these are some interesting little, it's not going to appeal to everybody, but, the fern dungeon is somewhat interesting if you can actually, get into some of the morphology, just understanding the basics. Monomorphic ferns versus dimorphic ferns. Of course, there are dimorphic ferns that are leptosporangiate. Osmundastrum, cinnamomeum, the cinnamon fern, which is super common, super cool fern. Super common is a dimorphic, for example. Onoclea sensibilis, one of my favorite ferns, the sensitive fern, that one's also dimorphic, etc., etc. Some of them it's kind of hard to tell, but I think that's enough about ferns for right now. Okay, as a very brief follow-up to my, fern tangent I went on a minute ago, here's an example of a dimorphic fern, okay? I'm pretty sure this is just cinnamomeum, Osmundastrum cinnamomeum. Alright, the cinnamon fern. Here are those vegetative leaves, typical fronds, you expect. God, the mosquitoes are really bad, I'm sorry, that's why I'm not focused. And then right here in the center, That's that spore bearing. That's that sporophyll. All right. So dimorphic, 2 types of leaves. You have a fertile frond in the center there with the spores on it. Get in there real close for you. And of course, this is a leptosporangiate fern. So those sporophylls, or not sporophylls, those sporangia are emerging from one cell versus multiple cells as you would have in a eusporangiate fern. And dispensing the spores, which will end up on the ground there, turn into a gametophyte. The gametophyte will make an archegonium and then a antheridium. Will dispense to the sperm and the egg respectively. Those will become fertilized, and once fertilized, it emerges as the mature sporophyte, which is what we're looking at right now. I gotta keep moving. I'm getting eaten alive. We can go into the ferns. Let me know if you want me to talk more about ferns, because I've been interested. I've been interested in them. These things get huge. In fact, there's a whole bunch more back there that I was just walking through. But this one, most of them are done with their sporophylls, their spore-bearing fronds for the season. This one just happened to, still have one that I can show you. God, these mosquitoes are like hawks. All right, I gotta get the fuck out of here.